for inviting me, making the arrangements, and being very adept and very effective in these telecommunications here and restoring us. So, well, this election process here is always subject to surprises. And that certainly happened last night when it was announced that the president and his wife, the first lady, have contracted the coronavirus, COVID-19. And we don't know if they have shown any symptoms or if they ever will in the short term. So we'll have to see how that goes along. I was contacted this morning by TASS, the Russian news agency, for comment on that. And but I had to come into this meeting first, so I'll get back to TASS. They have a Washington bureau. So anyway, very happy to have this opportunity. I wish I could be there with you. Hopefully that will happen sometime in the future. For the last 4 years, I've been almost every year at a conference in Volgograd. And the conference is going on again this year, but I won't be there in person. All of the foreign speakers will be by Zoom. So that's as it happens. Well, very good. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes and then answer questions for 15 minutes if we can still keep on our schedule. It looks like we start about 15 minutes late. So the topic is the status and the dynamics of the presidential campaign in the United States. And I'm going to cover 6 subjects. They are the current status of the race, what's going on, and then the phases of this presidential campaign. How did we get to this point? Thirdly, I'm going to cover the shifting and emerging issues like the Supreme Court vacancy, which occurred about 10 days ago. Then we'll talk about the dynamics shaping the race. And again, it looks like this infection of the president is certainly one of those dynamics, surprise. Then fifthly, we'll talk about how a president is actually elected in the US. And Anton has already referred to that being different than in many other places. It's an indirect system. And then we'll briefly talk about scenarios for a possible constitutional crisis in the US. Okay, so first of all, the status of the race. And every 4 years this happens. We have a presidential campaign. It's been going on. We've been re-electing our presidents since 1788. That's back in the 18th century. This was about 7 or 8 years after our successful revolution. So President Trump was elected 4 years ago. He had never been elected to public office before. So that probably accounts for some of his behaviors. He's the candidate of the Republican Party, which has existed for 170 years. Joe Biden is the former vice president. He served as vice president under President Obama, and he has been 47 years in government in Washington, D.C., and that's kind of maybe a compliment, but maybe an accusation as well. When he was elected, he was the youngest senator, and if he's elected president, he will be the oldest person elected president. So those are the 2 candidates, he of the Democratic Party, which is about over 200 years old. So the method and framework of electing a president was determined, as I said, in the late 18th century. But in the 19th century, there were increasing elements of democratization going on across the country. But the position of president and vice president has always been fiercely contested amongst those who want the office, and many times with controversy and accusations of a personal nature. These controversies and contested elections were particularly strong in 1800, shortly after the process started, also in 1824, and that resulted in some changes to the process. The most significant contests resulting in legal challenges and political maneuverings was in 1876 and also the year 2000, only 20 years ago. Both of those cases, the candidates who were chosen as president didn't carry the popular vote. The loser had more popular votes. This was also the case in 2016, 4 years ago, and we'll talk later about why that happened and how this can be. So this again could be, this year, could be a controversial year where the results are contested, and we'll talk about that. So the official election day is November the 3rd, which is only 31 or 32 days away, depending on how you count the days. It's about 4 full weeks, November 3rd, a Tuesday. But Americans are already voting. They're voting by mail-in ballot. Although the ballots that are mailed in, they don't begin to count the ballots until Election Day, November 3rd. And people can still go to polling places and do what they did previously, which was to vote in person and cast the same kind of ballot. But when mail-in ballots come in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, when those come in, it has to be verified that they are correct ballots and fair ballots, and they can be counted. So that's kind of where we are. Now let me go to my second subject, which is the phases of the presidential campaign. Having followed these presidential campaigns just as a private citizen since way back in 1956, I hate to admit it, but it was long ago, and particular elections along the way, I see that there are 3 phases that got us to where we are today. So the first phase is the preliminary phase of 6 months or more, which start in the preceding year. So that would be back in 2019, and 4 years ago was back in 2015. So the candidates announce that they are running at a pace that's agreeable to them when they want to come out and admit to it. They form their committees. Sometimes they are so-called exploratory committees, so they don't have to admit that they're a candidate, but they basically organize the people supporting them. They raise money, and there are various qualifications for someone to be a candidate to be on the ballot. And this is, again, very, very preliminary. This is just announcements. So there were 22 Democrats that announced for president this year, an extraordinarily, historically high record. Now, 4 years ago, there were 17 Republicans. So Trump beat 16 or 17 other people to win the nomination. So this is all in this preliminary period where they announce. Now, the next phase is about 7 months. And this would go from January or February through July or August of the year. And I call this the weeding out, the sifting out of candidates. And the whole purpose of this phase is to select delegates to the convention where the nomination, the designation will occur. So again, it's part of this long, protracted process because they have to get the person who is designated by the party needs a majority of the delegates to get that designation. So each state in the United States has its own way of selecting delegates to the National Convention. National Convention is a circus atmosphere with a lot of speeches, but importantly, it adopts a platform for the party, or in the UK and other places, they call the platform the manifesto what we're going to do, what are our promises. Now this year, the conventions were in late August, and well, normally they're in July or August, but they were put off because of the pandemic. And these conventions were virtual for both parties. There were Zoom meetings in effect, and there were different stagings that went on. Now, the third phase is the shortest, and that's where we are now. And that runs about 2.5 months. Traditionally, that phase starts after Labor Day, which is the first Monday in September. And that's a time when almost all Americans have taken their summer vacations. They're back at work, back at school. And but leading up to the third phase, the parties are raising money. So that's where we are now with 31, 32 days to go in this phase. Now we get into this phase, the high points are the debates for the candidates. And we just had one debate Tuesday night, which was kind of a train wreck in how it was, how the candidates reacted to each other. Very, very disillusioning to people on both sides, what the atmosphere was like, the accusations. But most of the time in the last few decades, there have been 3 presidential debates. So we've had one, there are 2 more to go for the president. And then there's traditionally one for the vice presidential candidate. And that's going to be next week. So we've got the Republican candidate, Mike Pence, who's been vice president for 4 years. And then we have Senator Kamala Harris, who is a woman. She's a Democratic candidate, and she's only the 3rd female that has ever run for vice president. There was a Democrat in 1984, a Republican woman in 2008. Harris is a political progressive. Some would say, the Republicans would say, a radical. Interesting person, however. Her parents are both immigrants. Her father is an African from the Caribbean island of Jamaica, and her mother from India. Both are highly educated and successful people in Silicon Valley. Okay, so what are the issues? That's my third point. Well, the issues shift during a campaign. A lot of the political observers can talk about what the issues are. Polls are conducted which say what's the most important thing to the electorate, to the American people. And so they may come up with the top 3, top 5 issues in this polling, but in the drama, in the campaigning, and in the media coverage is driven by the candidates themselves, things that happen, or things that surprise everyone, like the president contracting the virus. That's an issue. It's an issue on top of an issue, meaning that the management of the virus has definitely become an issue. So there's also possibly what happens is what we call the October surprise in the final month. Hey, we're in October. We've already had a big surprise, which was the president testing positive. But as October surprise refers to some kind of unexpected event, which we've had, and which may tilt the campaign or the race or upset all of the polling and all of the estimates of who's going to win. Okay, so usually the presidential race in the US comes down to the economy and unemployment rate, job creation, income disparities, anything about what's hitting people's pocketbooks, their wallet. So it's the economy. Now in 1980, candidate Ronald Reagan challenging then President Jimmy Carter asked the question, are you better now than you were 4 years ago? That's an economics question. In 1992, the challenger Bill Clinton campaigned against President George H.W. Bush, and his campaign had the mantra or the slogan that came out of their war room, the political war room. And that slogan was, "It's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid." In other words, don't talk about all these other issues. The only thing that matters is the economy. And in both cases where the economy really was featured, the challengers won. Reagan won, and Clinton won. That was despite President Bush in 92 had a very strong foreign policy record. The US was in a mild recession at the time. Now, also, Clinton was elected because it was third party in the race. Clinton did not get 50% of the vote. All right. In 2016, 4 years ago, candidate Trump ran against the slow growth of the economy that he said he attributed to President Obama and Vice President Biden. And he also had another issue, which was illegal immigration, which was portrayed as a domestic issue. And however, where are we today in these issues? Trump had claimed to have a highly favorable economy for 3 years until the COVID pandemic hit. Historically low unemployment for Blacks and Hispanic, and record income growth for lower income earners, and a return of manufacturing jobs. This is all Trump's story to the voters. And of course, things have changed quite a bit. When the economy was closed down, now it's opening up. And Trump says that we're having a V-shaped recovery, V-shaped, right up. Biden says, no, we have a K-shaped economy, meaning there's inequity and inequality in incomes. In a few days, we're going to get a report about the economic growth, and it's expected that it will be in excess of 30%. The unemployment rate was just reported as being 7.9%. That came out this morning. Last month, it was 8%. And they say that no president has been elected when the unemployment rate is 8% or higher. It's been the historical record. Well, Trump has got 0.1% in his favor at this point. But I think that that indicates how close the race will be. That's very indicative, in my opinion. COVID management of the pandemic has been made an issue by the Democratic Party, saying Trump has not done enough. And that has some relevance to that. It resonates, as we say, resonates with the voters. And I think Trump has done a lot. He certainly has pushed American private companies to produce therapeutic things, drugs, supplies of equipment for hospitals, gowns, masks, everything. He did all of that back in the early months of this, as well as shutting down air travel from China. So he has his arguments as well. But in the polls overall, Biden is ahead of Trump in many states, especially battleground states, as we say. Now, another issue which relates to coronavirus is healthcare. As I mentioned earlier, healthcare does rank when you poll the voters, ask them what issues are important to you. Healthcare comes out on top, edging out the economy as such. The Democrats had political gains in 2018 in the House of Representatives. which is similar to your Duma. They gained control of the House of Representatives, increased their majority. Another issue is the Supreme Court vacancy, which occurred about 10 days ago on the 16th. Well, it was almost 2 weeks ago. A judge on the Supreme Court died, and and she was a Democrat, highly regarded, wonderful lady, but definitely a progressive in that mold, and an iconic figure, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So if Trump, if he fills that vacancy, the Republicans will have 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. Actually, more of an effective majority of 5-4, because this Chief Justice is not seen as a reliable conservative vote, which he'd been put on. So the Supreme Court is a big issue. There will be a vote on it before the election. There's controversy about that. The Democrats and their supporters feel that putting on Trump's nominee will affect the Obama health care program, will affect abortion rights. So it's a very hot issue. It'll cause a lot of people to vote. Another issue, which I'll mention, I already said it, immigration is not really an issue at all. Maybe, in effect, maybe it's been submerged by other issues. Of course, also, I think that Trump has done a lot to fulfill his promises to his supporters. Foreign policy is not an issue unless something very dramatic happened outside the country. Trump talks about the challenge from China, but it's not become an issue. Maybe in one of the two remaining debates, that will become a topic for a few minutes. The war in Afghanistan, Trump's intention to withdraw from there, it's not an issue. There are differences of opinion about how fast the U.S. can pull out its troops, but it's not a campaign issue. Another thing in the foreign policy realm is the Middle East peace accords that Israel signed with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Supposedly Trump drove those. He really hasn't gotten any recognition for it. So that's, again, foreign policy. And military or national security, let's put it that way, is not an issue so far. I think that some of the issues raised by Trump against Obama and Biden and Clinton, they just have not connected with the voters. It's been more just politics. Neither Trump's charges about Biden's son making a lot of money in Ukraine and in China, people don't seem to care about this. Another issue, another factor, it's really more of a factor, is as far as a dynamic. Let me switch over now to the dynamics of the campaign. Another point here of my subjects. I think the effect of the media in this campaign, they continue to show their, what Trump would call fake news by the media, which runs a negative narrative, negative stories continuously revealed. And I could cite some of those, but I can see the clock ticking away. But the press and its coverage, in general, the press has been negative on Trump and will continue to do so. Other dynamics shaping the race, we've already mentioned COVID, and that more from the standpoint of how many people will go to the polls and vote, how many of them will show up in person, and which states have only, which states encourage poll voting and not only mail-in ballots. So that brings me to the mail-in ballots. There really are two kinds of mail-in ballots. One is what used to be called absentee ballots, or you might say requested ballots. People who say, I want to vote by mail, and they contact the election authorities and say, send me a ballot, you know, when you're supposed to send it. The other is universal ballots. That means everybody on the roll of the voter rolls is automatically sent a ballot. So many states have had mail-in ballots for years, and increasingly they've had those mail-in ballots. So they know how to do it. But if you all of a sudden decide to send ballots to everyone, problems can ensue. Goes to the wrong address, to people who have died, and many other situations, which I won't get into. But those are the two distinctions. And the Republicans have a lot of concerns about that. The Democrats favor sending out ballots to everybody. Now, the difficulty is certifying what is a valid mail-in ballot. And you have to look at the signature that on the ballot and compare it to the one on file. So that takes time, and it adds to the difficulty in counting the ballots. But this whole mail-in situation is a dynamic that definitely will shape the outcome of the race. Okay, how a president is elected, it's really indirect, as Professor Anton has already said. It is not direct popular vote, despite the US talking about democracy. It's not a popular vote. I call it, and I'm going to be writing an article about this, the election of the electors. In each state, people vote for a list of people that they don't even know. They're not listed on the ballot. They're behind the scenes. So each party has said, here are our candidates in this state to vote for the president. And they're pledged to vote for that candidate, the Republican candidate, Democratic candidate. So the voters really go in, and while they may see the name of Trump and Biden, they're not voting for them. They're voting for the electors. And this comes out of the 18th century kind of an approach, where there wasn't really popular votes in the US. There were some, but really not many in certain states. So you're elected by the electors, and we call the body that does this, and it isn't one, there are 50. It's called the Electoral College, Electoral College. And it's usually a subject of debate after the election, because people want to change it or do away with it and have a popular vote. So this term, Electoral College, if you're familiar with any of you with the Roman Catholic Church, they have a college of cardinals, college of cardinals. So a college is not just a place where there are professors. It's a body of esteemed people who have maybe one duty, and that's to make an election, to participate in a selection of a leader. Of course, in history, the Holy Roman Empire in Western Europe, there were electors, 9 people from German states who elected the emperor. So those were called electors. So that's where this terminology comes from. After the votes are counted in each state, the authorities in each state will say, okay, the electors for Trump won, the electors for Biden won. And they come in and they sign documents, And they have a meeting in that state on December 14th. December 14th. That's when the ballots are actually cast for president and vice president. Not November 3rd, December 14th. And the date changes every election. It has to be 41 days after the popular vote. So they put all these votes together, they send them to Washington, D.C., and you have the House of Representatives and the Senate meets. They will be meeting on January 6th, January 6th. And they will count the votes cast by the electors meeting in each capital city of each state. And then that's really when the official is announced. So I think there's going to be a lot of things happening in late November and December as we get problems verifying the mail-in ballots and counting the mail-in ballots. It takes a long time to certify the ballots. Where I live here in Sonoma, in the Sonoma County, small jurisdiction of 500,000 people, 80% of the people here have requested mail-in ballots. So like myself, we receive a ballot because we had requested it. And it takes the local authorities 3 to 4 weeks to verify the ballots and to count them. And they have to do it within a month because they have to report the results to the state capital in Sacramento. So I think there's going to be a slow count, number one, slow count, and there will be challenges, missing signatures, signatures that can't be verified, ballots that are destroyed or damaged, as we had in the year 2000. It's going to make the count very slow and open to challenges. I think the Biden campaign, we understand, has hired 600 lawyers, 600 lawyers to be across the United States to challenge the local results. So we probably won't know the winner on November 3rd, despite the exit polls by the media. So therefore, I think, and my last topic is just about a couple of sentences, given our time, there's going to be a lot of contention, legal challenges during November and into December. But each state has to have their electors meet on December 14. They have that deadline. If they don't meet, then they won't have any votes to cast. And in that circumstance, if neither candidate gets a majority of electoral votes, then it gets put into a different approach. The House of Representatives, voting by state, selects the president. So it'll be like your Duma by region, determining who's president. Again, an indirect approach. Well, let me end at this point, and I'm open to your questions. And Anton will control the questions. And I'm happy to be available for as long as you wish, as long as Anton will allow for the next 20 minutes or so.
Ask a question?
Yes.
In Russia, we don't really like when people and media persons encourage others to vote, or maybe just say that voting dates. And how do you feel when media persons are encouraging their maybe viewers or subscribers to vote?
Let's, if you would clarify that to make sure that I have it correctly, that in Russia you don't like it when people do what?
Encourage others to vote.
Encourage others to what?
Like media people, media people, famous people, celebrities, who
oh yes, right.
who encourage people to vote. Do you like that?
Yeah, It's, I think it has no effect, really. So they get publicity, but I think there's a lot of, not a lot of, there is resistance to that. So not much of an issue, but I think and it could be fair to say that people don't pay attention or don't think it has an effect, or they are mildly opposed. So no impact.
Thank you.
Well, any other questions? Come on, don't be.
Well, as I hinted, depending on what happens, maybe you have to have me back in late November or December.
Yes.
But I think that since it's in a couple minutes to wrap up here, I think that there will be a lot of controversy because we'll see a certain result November 3rd, that night, and the media always conducts what's called exit polls, meaning people exit from the polling place and they're asked when they come out, who did you vote for? And based on that, as well as preliminary results, a winner can be indicated. And sometimes, most of the time, a candidate will actually concede the election. They'll actually concede. But I think this time we're going to have a much lower in-person voting. And I think there's going to be reporting of mail ballots days and weeks after November 3rd. And there will be, I mean, if Trump gets the popular vote and claims victory, and Biden does not concede, which he shouldn't that night, the ballots are going to come in. They're going to be discovered and found and reported and counted. And maybe by the end of the month, Biden will have more votes. So it will be, for people who are interested in politics, this will be a year of high drama.
Well, anybody else?
No.
Well, I guess if you experience, you gotta go, Bill.
No, I don't have to go. That changed. But anyway, let me just say this. If anyone is interested, I will send Anton a bibliography, a list of books on these presidential elections. So you can look over those and decide if there's a year that's of interest to you. You can buy all these books on Amazon. So as I say, if you're interested in comparative politics, comparative government institutions, and how campaigns have been run over the years, you'll have a great choice of a book to read, of course, always in English. So I want to thank all of you for tuning in. We had our own October surprise.
Yeah.
And again, thanks to Anton for restoring the meeting. And thanks all of you for participating. And it's been fun for me to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Bye-bye.
Bill, we're really thankful for you, for your time, and for your valuable effort to enlighten us about, this complicated political world that you're having in the United States and that you are experiencing right now. And thank you for being open to any questions. And thank you very much for your readiness to help us. And we hope we could help you in any way with any information we could provide for you and about our life. So I guess if we could do it later, probably November, December, we could arrange it. And next time,
Very good. I'd be happy to do it. You let me know. Okay.
Yes. And next time we won't admit everyone. We will admit only the selected ones. Yes.
I think that's. I think you should control it. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I'm really sorry about that, but thank you very much.
No apologies needed.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Goodbye. Have a wonderful day.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.